Twisted Visions Autumn Challenge 2024. I think you've all seen the promo video, so rather than waste time playing the whole thing, here it is in fast forward.
This is the Queensland Museum. It's been here since 1986, and in that time it has welcomed millions of visitors. Technically, today the museum is known as the Queensland Museum Kurilpa. And before I head on in, just remember there are two parts to the museum. First of all, there's the cataloguing and storage of all the millions of items they've got in there. That's the part the public doesn't see. And then the rest of the museum is devoted to public access. Reviews for the museum are almost always overwhelmingly positive. People love the place, and rightly so. I love the museum as well. I did my work experience here in grade 11. I've donated fossils to the museum, and I've volunteered here in the past at the Star Trek exhibit. But some reviews do mention a lingering problem with the museum, and that's what this video is about. First though, let's take a quick history lesson about the museum. And why is that sideways?
In 1862, the first Queensland Museum opened in the wholly unlikely of venues, the old windmill at Spring Hill. In 1868, due to the old windmill being a completely bonkers place to house a museum, the collection was moved to the Parliamentary Building on Queen Street. In 1873, the museum then relocated to the new Post Office Building, also on Queen Street. In 1879, the museum moved to its first purpose-built venue at William Street, a beautiful building that was unfortunately wholly unsuited to house a museum. In 1899, and because it literally had nowhere else to go, it was moved to the Exhibition Building on Gregory Terrace. Originally intended to be a temporary situation, it ended up being there for 86 years. And then in 1986, it moved to its current venue at the Cultural Centre. The Cultural Centre was designed and built in stages from 1976 until 1988, inspired by the Oakland Museum of California, which opened way back in 1969.
Oakland is part of the San Francisco Bay Area. Bizarrely, there is a city of Brisbane also in the San Francisco Bay Area. Oh, that's weird. All right, let's go in and take a look. One, the building hasn't really changed over the past 38 years inside and out. In fact, it still retains a lot of its 1970s architectural aesthetics.
The State Library underwent a massive modernisation and was reopened in 2006 as a totally new, ultra-cool venue. While the art gallery still looks pretty much the same, there is now next door the massive and very impressive Gallery of Modern Art, or GOMA for short. And right now, the Performing Arts Complex is set to experience its own transformation into something even more spiffy. But the museum remains virtually the same. Despite a recent and rather modest $14 million upgrade, which mainly focused on the need to upgrade the building's disability access and other non-compliant elements, the museum still looks and feels outdated. Even the dinosaurs outside on Grey Street look outdated and, I'm pretty sure by now, historically inaccurate.
2. Aesthetics aside, is the museum a fun, interesting and informative place to visit? Well, it depends on who you ask.
To be honest, it seems to be mostly geared to children. The plethora of Lego-themed dinosaur exhibits shows that kids are the target audience. For adults, it's pretty much just a place to kill a couple of hours while the kids run around. A clear example of this is the ever-expanding shop, which is stuffed with dinosaur merchandise. Should an adult wish to purchase a book about paleontology or botany that wasn't written for a 7-year-old, they'd probably be disappointed.
3. Virtually everywhere in the museum, all you see are stuffed animals. Floor after floor, display after display. Taxidermy is everywhere. Suffice it to say, it does become rather monotonous and tiresome after a while. It's more like a cabinet of curiosities, a cornucopia of culled critters and creatures at Kurilpa, consigned to cases on carpet, constructed for the benefit of kids for the purpose of something beginning with C. 4. Why is the human story largely absent from the museum? There are a couple little display cases here and there, but that's about it.
The museum's own website states, "Today, the Queensland Museum is the keeping place for the state collection, a magnificent assemblage of 1.2 million cultural objects, natural history specimens and geological treasures, and more than 14 million research items." That, of course, is very impressive. And while some of the natural history and geologic treasures are on display for the public, where are the cultural items?
I'm not talking about human remains, and I am aware that the museum has gradually been repatriating the human remains that they have here back to their lands of origin. I'm thinking more things like stone tool technology and weapons and the human aspect to the story of Queensland. 5. What does the museum really tell us about the history of Queensland? What story is it presenting? In my opinion, the displays don't really fit together in any coherent way. It's a bit of a mishmash. It's like a zoological jumble sale. 6. There really isn't a lot of space there for the public to access. The building, of course, is massive on the outside. A lot of that is taken up with storage and cataloguing. But the actual area that the public can use is really quite limited.
I've seen the storage facilities there, and they are immense when I did my work experience. And just being honest, while I was doing my work experience, I did accidentally sneeze on a mask from Vanuatu.
1. In terms of the look of the building, it really needs to be brought into the 21st century. All the other buildings here have had or are in the process of getting makeovers. Therefore, if the Performing Arts Centre is going to look something like this, then why can't the museum do so as well? This really is a dull-looking building. It's heavy and it's out of date. I personally don't think it excites or inspires anymore. 2. I would create a chronological narrative about Queensland. As soon as you get inside, you start kind of at the beginning and work your way through the history of Queensland by the time you get to the end. Now, that may not be possible with the current construction, the interior of the museum. There is, however, a very, very good exception in there. It pretty much goes through the history of Queensland, and it does include the human element as well. And that's a free exhibit, doesn't cost anything to get in, but the way it's structured, you really learn, you go on a journey. I thought that was wonderful. And 3, don't forget us adults. Now, of course, we all want to encourage children to become biologists and evolutionists and zoologists. But the museum, it feels like it's really just a play date for kids. Somewhere where you can take the kids for a couple of hours and they can run around. Don't forget the adults, because you need to educate us too. We want to learn while we're in there. And please include the human story. I know there's a couple of little bits and pieces there, but there's not much. Everything from the First Nations people up until post-1788 settlers. You know, I've lost count of the number of museums I've visited over the years, but my 2 favourite ones are these.
The Museum of Sydney on the corner of Phillip and Bridge Streets, and the Musée des Beaux-Arts d'Archéologie Besançon Dauphins.
These museums, to me, are excellent examples of how museums can tell a story in an intelligent, mature and coherent manner. Right, in conclusion, I'm just going to say it. I think that the Queensland Museum needs to be a little more worldly. It kind of feels like it needs to grow up a little bit. In its current state, it will never rank as one of the world's great museums. And maybe that's not what it's trying to do. It's just trying to be the best museum possible for here in Queensland. That's fine, really. It does fulfill a very important role behind the scenes of storing and cataloguing and preserving millions of artefacts and items in the public access areas. That's where it's wanting. It's uninspiring. It's just there. Please don't think I'm being nasty or picking on the museum. That's not the case at all. I'm just trying to say things that I think are honest. Maybe these are things that we're all thinking, but no one's willing to say. After all that, I still do love the Queensland Museum, and I will look forward to many return visits. And if you haven't been there or haven't been there for a long time, I highly encourage you to come along and have a look and form your own opinions. This was just my opinion. You may totally disagree with it, and that's fine. Anyway, there it is. That's what I would change about Brisbane. If you like the video, please consider hitting that subscribe and like button. I'll see you again soon.